Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, I am honored to welcome a remarkable friend, Mike George. Mike is a family caregiver and the founder of Soaring Families. And please stay tuned after the episode for a special short film of Mike and his son Ben, including me, Ben's story. Welcome, Mike George, family caregiver and founder of Soaring Families to All Home Care Matters. Welcome, Mike. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Lance.
It's our pleasure. You know, I introduced you as a family caregiver and then founder of Soaring Families, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But why don't you share with our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with you a little bit more about your story and who you're caring for?
Sure. Well, my wife and I have three young adult children. Our youngest is Ben, although he's in his early 30s. And Ben essentially requires 24-hour care. He was born with a virus called CMV, which none of us knew anything about, and none of us knew how it even happened. But the reality was that it caused developmental issues in utero, and hence when he was born, we found out that there was this life of 24-hour care that was ahead of us. And so all that to say, though, it really was a huge learning experience for us. As I say, Ben's now 32, but he's also a university graduate. So yes, he requires lots of physical support and other things, but it just goes to show you that, with the right support and the right environment, that anyone can do basically anything. But in the early days, it was there were a lot of health issues. There were seizures and surgeries and lots of panic rushes to the ER, just to try to understand what health issues that we were dealing with. But those tended to stabilize probably by the time he was, 6 or 7. And then it was really about, okay, these are the limitations that Ben has. These are the things that have been sort of put in front of us. And it was now about, okay, how do we try to figure out, how does he follow, the normative pathways of life, if I could phrase it that way. Things like, going to public school and, having friends and things that all of us just take for granted and things that just happen. And so I guess the journey for us as family caregivers started basically on hour one of day one. And back in the early 90s, there weren't many supports obvious that could help us. And so we, kind of limped along and made all kinds of mistakes. And it was just, I guess what guided us though was that, Ben deserved and to follow the things that his siblings had. And that's kind of what drove us each and every day.
Yeah. And, Mike, before we move on, for people that aren't familiar with what CMV is, how would you describe that to somebody, or what is the definition?
Right. So it stands for cytomegalovirus, and it's actually a very common virus. And sometimes most of us have had it. And for most of us, you may not even know you've had it. You may have some minor symptoms, but for someone who's pregnant, for a developing fetus, it can be quite devastating. And it's actually, even though very few people know about it, it's the leading viral cause of disability worldwide. And it continues to be. And I had no idea what it was. And I have 3 physicians in my family, 2 siblings and my dad, who passed away a number of years ago. But at the time, all they knew what CMV was a complication for AIDS patients. And it had nothing to do with Ben. But it is something that we can test for it now. Nobody tested for it before. And it's the kind of thing that it's almost sort of part of the way society has evolved in that because it's so common. If you're around other people who have it and you don't even know you have it, then you develop the antibodies. But sort of so I guess my generation, my wife's generation, we didn't go to daycare and we weren't exposed to a whole bunch of different things. And so this is all conjecture, but probably what happened, and according to the infectious disease experts, is that Jan, my wife, contracted it, when she was in her early 20s at the time she was pregnant. And that's sort of the perfect storm of things. If either of us had had it, probably earlier in life, it wouldn't have made a difference because we would have already had the antibodies and it wouldn't have had that big a deal. But all that's hindsight, of course, and we didn't know what the deal was. But I mean, it's still a prevalent thing. It's still something that exists in the world, and it's still causing issues for lots of families. I think most of us have heard about Zika virus. Well, it's similar in the fact that it can cause a lot of developmental issues for young children, but it's not nearly as common as what CMV is. And so I guess we drew the short straw in that sense that to actually have it impact our family, and needless to say, it has changed our lives forever.
Thank you for sharing that. So as you're thrust into this role of now becoming a family caregiver, I'm assuming like most family caregivers, you weren't planning for it. It wasn't expected. It wasn't something you ever really envisioned yourself doing. When did you get this idea to take that situation that you went through and that you're still going through in a sense and supporting others through your company, Soaring Families, and explain what Soaring Families is?
Sure. Well, you're quite right. I mean, nobody chooses to be a family caregiver, right? And there's no sort of playbook that's there. Okay, this happens, so now you follow these steps and everything will be okay. Like that doesn't exist. I guess what sort of drove us towards this, and maybe drove me to it, is that I despite all the challenges and the support that Ben requires, I was determined to say that we've got to there must be a solution to this. There must be a way to solve these problems. Some of them are solvable and some of them aren't. But that's just kind of what makes me tick, is being a problem solver and trying to get to the bottom of things. And so I guess there was one, water moment, if I can use that expression, for me. That at one point, when Ben's older brother, I don't know, he was probably 10 at the time, and I was picking him up from choir practice, and there were, 20 or so other sets of parents waiting to pick their kids up, and things were running overtime. The people got delayed and whatever. But when I was there was one dad who was with obviously his other kids waiting to pick his son up, and one of them obviously had some physical challenges, and I witnessed the dad being very frustrated for one reason or another, and was not sort of losing his patience with that son. And I looked at it and thought, I get that the stress and the pain and everything and the overwhelm you get with having someone who requires, lots of extra care like his son did. And I knew exactly what he was feeling. And it was at that point I thought, I can, we've been sort of down that road a few more years than he was. And I wanted to go over and, sort of put my arm around him and say, it's okay. It's all right to be frustrated. So, things will work out. There are some highs and lows, and days are good and some days are not. I didn't do that. But it was kind of an eye-opener for me that, it's not just our family who is struggling. This was just one example of thousands and millions of families out there that deal with this every single day. And it was like reality right in front of me now. And that kind of made me think, well, you know what? I think I can help people with it. Even though we're, we don't have any extra time to do anything, extra energy to do anything. It seemed like a bit of a calling, if you will, to do it. And that's kind of how the idea of Soaring Families started. And I guess from that point, I thought, if I had, I guess, a manual or a book on day one to follow, that would have been hugely helpful. And so at that point, I started, thought, well, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book on what it was like to raise Ben in the first 5 or 6 years of life. And that started me down the road of wanting to help families. And so it took a long time to put this book together. I had never written a book before, and self-published it. But it was that start into, okay, there's got to be some ways in which we can reach out and help families. And then in 2015, we formalized it into the company we call Soaring Families. And from there, it was trying to, where do people need the most help, and what is it that we can do in the bit of time that we have to give in helping families. So that's kind of where it all started.
Wonderful. So someone's watching or listening to this, and what's the website for Soaring Families? And we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Sure. It's simply soaringfamilies.com.
So they go to soaringfamilies.com.
Right.
How are you then supporting them once they get to Soaring Families? Like what is the services and the ways you're supporting family caregivers?
So it's interesting that, I still am, very passionate about, look, I can help you in these ways, but it's still a learning experience for me to see when people are ready for that. And oftentimes people aren't. They just are unsure. They don't know. They come up with a lot of reasons why they're apprehensive in actually engaging support. And so the first thing that we do is we just want to get people to, help with their, I guess, getting through the day. And some days, as I say, are better than others. And some days are just crushingly overwhelming. And so the first thing we do would allow them to, there's a free guide that we offer on what we call Calm the Day. And so these are the practices that we have learned over the years to kind of put in place to kind of get control of things and bring the level of stress down a notch or two. And that's kind of the starting point for how we can actually start to help and service people. It is a lot of it is sort of your mindset and how you approach it, because there's so many things coming at you on any given day, right? But beyond that, there are, other practical things that we can offer. The biggest thing for us was understanding that we couldn't do everything all on our own. My personality would say that I want to do it all, but I realized that there were many times when I couldn't. And so raising your hand to ask for help is actually a really smart thing to do. And so the biggest change in our situation was when we started to bring people in to help us, and not family people, but people that we've hired to support Ben through a part of the day. And that doesn't mean it's round the clock. It started out sort of a part-time, a couple of days a week. We needed help because Jen and I were both working, and, this person could come in and handle this part of the day. And that kind of grew into, okay, well, we've got that part working. Well, what if we, needed help in the evening? What would that look like? And little by little, we kind of grew this team around of, what we could afford and what made sense for us. And what we found was that having that part of your day kind of looked after, if you will, gave us the space and the energy to kind of do other things and to think about the overall, where's life going? What it's going to look like in 10 years and 20 years. When you're immersed in it, up to your neck every day, you can't see any of that stuff. And then that led to, okay, well, if this has helped us so much, we've got to share, how to build this team around them. And so over probably 3 or 4 year period, we developed a training program called the Caregiver Support Formula. And it takes you step by step through how you build that team around you and how you make it work for not only your family member, but for you as well.
Do you remember the first family that you helped through Soaring Families?
That's a great question. Yeah, I do actually. So there were a group. There not at the time there were a number of Facebook groups that were out there. There still are, where people kind of collaborate. But we found one kind of by chance that's called One More Thing, and it really is, as a group of family caregivers that actually live in the Ottawa area, in Ontario. And even though we don't live in Ontario, I kind of reached out and sort of commented on a couple of things. And they called it One More Thing because, that's kind of the mantra of family caregivers. Oh, I just have one, this is now one more thing I have to worry about. Great. And there was a lot of, really cool families involved. And it wasn't just, a lot of these groups tend to be a handful that are complaining about everything. They just need a place to vent, right? This group wasn't like that. And so I got to know a few people personally. And one of them actually had a son who was medically fragile, but really, really, eager to learn and do a bunch of things. And we had a kind of a prototype of this training program. And without me knowing, he signed up for it right away. It was, wasn't a whole lot of money at the time because it was a beta version. And I thought, wow, he actually trusts me and believes that I can do this stuff, right? And, it was some of the comments we got back from him were, gee, I'd never thought about that. This is really helpful. And that was the spark to kind of keep growing. And it wasn't just an idea and a dream in my head. It actually, was something that helped family for real.
That's incredible. With All Home Care Matters, we like to provide helpful resources like Soaring Families and, share these stories so that family caregivers don't feel like they're the only ones going through it and that there's others out there, and right. You're a great example of that, Mike. And we also like to provide helpful tips and support. How do you help families on your end deal with the stress of caregiving? Because, like you said, one more thing, and I think that's a perfect name. It could be applied to parenting and a lot of things, but I think for family caregiving for sure. So right. How are you guys at Soaring Families helping families deal with that stress of caregiving?
I guess it all kind of depends on how people want to get engaged with what we're doing. But it starts with, getting on. We have a newsletter that we send out on a weekly basis. And so getting families to get that free guide and sort of get engaged. And there are, we're very open about having to, wanting to support people. But I guess the first stage of helping people deal with the stress is, part of it is what you just said. You're not alone. None of us can do this alone, and none of us are alone in how we do it. And the second part is helping them sort of wrap their arms around the problems that are in front of them and feel that they have the confidence that and give some of that it's not a lost cause, and that if they have that confidence, they can start getting using their own creativity on how they tackle something. So the initial part of it is somewhat informal on how we can sort of get families and try to meet them where they are, and then there are other more hands-on tools and things if it makes sense for their situation, that we can help them actually take control of the situation and sort of move up that curve on feeling that they're empowered and they don't have to deal with only the stress every single day.
Yeah, you go through a little bit about how CSF works.
Sure. So the formula that we came up with was
explain what CFS.
Yeah, sorry. CSF is the caregiver support formula. Yeah. Good point. Everybody likes to use acronyms, right? And they all mean different things, I suppose. But the formula is really based on three, I guess, what we would call pillars of home care. One is, and that is, you're bringing someone in to augment or add to, the care that you're providing when you can't do it every single hour, every single day. The first one is obviously to find the right caregiver, right? So how do you know that that person that is out there, or that perhaps maybe an agency has, they have a resource pool of people, or people you know through acquaintances, or whatever the way in which you find these people that you might consider bringing into your home or your parents' home, whatever the situation is. How do you figure out whether they're the right person? And that's kind of the first pillar, the first part of this formula that we show families how to sort through all the information or lack thereof to see if they're the right person. Because oftentimes people who are, at least in our experience, people who maybe have worked in a hospital setting or a large facility setting, those skills don't necessarily translate well into a home setting because it's a very different environment. Doesn't mean they can't, but there are differences that you kind of have to be aware of and try to understand. And so things like, just because the person you're looking at is a registered nurse doesn't mean that they're going to have the right personality or the right fit for your home. So that's kind of pillar number one, that we help families sort through and get to someone that they think is going to work. And the biggest question that we, challenge families to do to ask is, could I leave this person alone with my family member? If you can't answer, a resounding yes, then you probably don't want to hire them, right? So it really gets to the bottom of, is this going to be a good fit? The second part of it, the second pillar is the person you're bringing in, and it's regardless of whether you actually pay them out of your pocket or there's some other funding program, it doesn't matter. But they've become an employee of yours in one way or another. And your home or your parents' home becomes their workplace. And so that's a different way of looking at things. It creates a different dynamic because there are certain boundaries that you don't want to cross in that relationship. You want it to be a professional and a thriving work environment for them, but it's also your home. So how do you figure that out? Like if you're in an office setting, you can just leave and go home, and that's okay. But in your home, it's both. And so we show families how to get yourself organized around how do you make it functional so that the job of that caregiver can go really well, but also that you maintain that home setting because it's your home or your parents' home. And then the third pillar is what we would call really around relationships. And so there's a people leadership component of home care for you as the family caregiver that you need to understand. People are coming into your home. People have their own, challenges outside of their work. So how do you help them bring their best every day? Because when they're on the top of their game, your family member is getting the best care possible, and everything just kind of flows. And so we've taken the principles that we've learned in our work lives around people leadership and overlaid that into a home care setting. And there's simple things that you can apply. There's simple checks and balances that you can go through to make sure that things are staying on track, and that that they're enjoying what they're doing because you've spent all this time trying to find the right person. You want to keep them, presumably. And you don't have to be, an HR expert or a really good, talker or relationship builder. These are simple practices that we've learned that work really well, that are easy to implement, and they go a long way to keeping that, that relationship going, and so that you feel good and they feel good, and it's just a great home care experience. So all those three pillars make up the formula that basically over 25 years of us building in teams for our home, we've learned, and we use those every day as well. It's not something that we've built and don't even put into practice, and it's something that we know works. And the hundreds of other families that have applied it in their lives, it works for them as well.
You mentioned something, Mike, about feedback and responses from families. What are the families telling you who have gone through this training?
Well, it's interesting that we think we've figured this out, which we have, but you until you can actually test it outside of our personal situation, you're not really sure, is this the right thing for people? But I can tell you, we've implemented it and provided it to families in a couple of different ways. One is through self-study, self-paced. The programs, it's all video training. You can go through it at your, whenever you have time to do it. But we've also offered group coaching programs. So we basically take families in a group setting and by the hand and go through this formula. And that seems to be the most effective because, of course, you get that feedback and you can ask questions and you get the support from other families right there and then. But all that to say, we always thought that it was really good, but the feedback from these group coaching programs is that honestly, it's been transformational for them. When they start the program and then 6 weeks later after they're through it, they're a different person. They now have the confidence of, geez, I've got all these tools I can use, and yeah, we've talked about different scenarios, and there are things that will come up that you probably haven't encountered before, but they feel really well equipped that they can actually do this on their own. And that's really our goal, is to empower people, so you don't need us, right? We want to get you up that learning curve, but we can also help you along the way as well. So that's what's kept me going, to do this every day, find different ways to help families to meet them, because we know it works. And, we've got these testimonials that make us feel good too. And we know that we've helped somebody.
You've talked about meeting families where they are on their journey. Share a little bit more about what you mean by that and how you're doing that.
Sure. So, I guess this is probably maybe a blind spot for me that, we've got this formula figured out. We know how to help you build a team. Why aren't people lining up and raising their hand? And, it's a big decision point for people to say, okay, I can't do it all on my own. And there's, maybe there's a little bit of guilt, or maybe there's a little bit of, I don't know, the uncertainty of not realizing that you can't do it all on your own. Eventually you'll come to that conclusion. But before that happens, there's still lots of help that we can provide families. And so in the last little while, we've tried to sort of back it up in terms of where are people in their thought process and where are they in their journey caring for their child or their spouse or their parent. And one of the things that almost to a T that people would probably say is that, they wouldn't self-identify as a family caregiver. I don't say to people, I'm Ben's caregiver, right? I'm his dad, even though he's 30 years old. And the same with I should mention, my dad lived to the age of 100 on it, and in the last 14 years of his life, he was on his own. So like that relationship you have as a family doesn't change, even though a lot of the activities you probably are doing are caregiving related. And so if you turn that around and think, okay, you are doing those duties, so call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. How do you get better at doing those things? And so one of the outcomes or one of the outputs of the formula is what we call the Pink Book. And what that is it's really a simple caregiving guide that you create for the way you deliver the care. So for example, there's probably medications involved. Almost everybody has some level of medications that need to be administered at, whatever intervals. There's routines and care routines you have to go through. There's nutrition particulars that you want to make sure, right? So if you're the only person doing it, chances are you haven't written all those down. You've got them in your head because you do them every day. But what the Pink Book does, it helps you to get those things down on paper so that, let's say that you're not able to provide the care tonight because you're sick or something else happens in your life. Could anyone else sort of just step in and do that care? And if it's all resting on your shoulders and it's all in your head, then the answer is probably no. And so what the Pink Book does is it helps families, sort of get the information about the essential care information out of their head into a guide that is specific to them, that's customized for them. And what that does, it actually starts to relieve some of the pressure and the burden that you have because it's only on you, and now it's down on paper. And so the Pink Book is a set of organized, professionally designed templates to help you get that information out in an organized fashion. Whether you're organized or not, it doesn't matter. It's customized for you. You can fill out as much or as little as you want. But the key is to get things started. And that's kind of where we start to meet people is like, they maybe they forgot what the doctor's instructions were, right? How do I keep all that straight in my head? So just start with a few simple templates today. And then what that'll do is start to help you look at things differently. And it gives you sort of the time and the space to see the bigger picture. And then your journey starts to become a little less chaotic, and a little less overwhelming.
That's incredible. And how do people access or get a copy of the Pink Book?
So if they can go to the website, as I mentioned, but they can also go to newpinkbook.com, and it describes it even in more detail of what types of templates there are and how do you use it and why it's so easy to do. And I guess one thing I wanted to point out too is that it's meant to be a paper-based, right? It's not a digital app. And it's purposeful in that because it's meant to live in the home of the person being cared for. You can certainly, the forms are electronic and you can either fill them out by hand or you can enter the information on your laptop or whatever and share those if you want. But the point is that it's there when the person the caregiver who's coming in can reference that instantly, right? And it's always meant to be a living document because habits change, meds change, all that sort of thing, and that's why it's so easy to keep it current.
Wonderful. Mike, if I'm fond of asking this question of guests who, have a mission, obviously your mission is helping family caregivers with Soaring Families. I like to ask, if we didn't connect for over 5 years and we ran into each other at a Red Wings game or, something along those lines, and I said, what have you been up to? 5 years from now, where are you and Soaring Families at? What's your goal?
Well, quite simply, our goal is to support as many families as possible. And we do actually have a 10-year goal that we want to reach 1 million families in the next 10 years. We believe every family caregiver should have a Pink Book. That's an easy one, right? It's a low-cost way to get started. But we're really eager to build, a community, for lack of a better term, of soaring families where we can support each other. We've gone through some of the initial pain of what caregiving is like, but we all kind of have this support of each other and we feel empowered that, it doesn't matter what's going to come our way. We've got the right mindset, the right tools, and the right support to do it. So I guess in 5 years, I'd say, we've probably helped 100,000 families and, all across the world, and look what they've done. And, sort of elevated that level of care and the level of awareness of what families go through.
Wonderful. And before we go, share the website one more time and we'll have it in the show notes and on the screen again for you.
Sure. It's soaringfamilies.com. Simple as that. And if people want to reach out to me, you can email me at mike@soaringfamilies.com.
Wonderful. Well, Mike, George, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your story and Ben's story. We wish you all the best and look forward to talking to you again in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Lance.
Our pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Had a busy day?
You did.
Good. All right, Ben. Have a great day, buddy.
See you later, Dad.
We'll see you this afternoon.
My name is Ben. Benjamin Michael George. This isn't my real voice. I don't talk the way you do, or walk on my own. But when it comes to the things that really matter, I'm no different from anybody else.
I'm Mike, Ben's dad. In the early 90s, I thought I was doing all the right things. I had married Jan, my high school soulmate. We had 2 wonderful children, Connor and Tori, and we were excited about building a fulfilling future for them. Life was good.
We were surprised and blessed to find out that we were pregnant a 3rd time. And along came Ben in June of '92. Everything was just as it was with the other 2. A very joyous moment.
An hour after Ben was born, that joy was swept away. A doctor said, "We have a problem. You have a very sick baby. He has an enlarged liver and spleen. His head is too small and his blood platelets are dangerously low." Those words felt like ice.
And my first thought was, they've mixed up babies. This can't be my baby, because I just had my baby in my arms. But in fact, it was Ben, and all I could say to her was, could he die? And she said, yes, he could.
At that moment, our world crashed down. This doctor seemed like a monster. I felt the scars of that day would never heal. A few days later, a neurologist said something I hear in my head to this day. Ben may never be able to walk, talk, or go to school. With that, my hope for a fulfilling life vanished.
And I tried to picture, what this, will I have a blob in a crib? I couldn't imagine what that meant. And I couldn't imagine looking at him that it was so severe.
Ben's first few years often beat us to exhaustion, with one crisis blending into the next. There were seizures and surgeries. One year, I counted more than 70 panicked rushes to the ER. But there was light too. We came to see there was a smart, social, loving person trapped deep inside Ben. And we were driven to help him express that. So, when he was 5, we sent him to kindergarten. He deserved that chance.
But we were worried about, what if he had a seizure while he was at school? How would they handle that? And so for the first many months, I think for the first year of kindergarten, I went with him. But I didn't want to be in the classroom with him, so I set up a desk outside and I would work on whatever I was working on. And I stayed in the school the whole time. It was really the only way that we could make it work.
Throughout elementary school, we focused on helping Ben develop physically. No one knew how to help him academically. As he moved into middle school, we started to challenge that. Still, experts told us he had little potential. It was frustrating. We didn't know where to turn. Back then, we had no idea we were on the verge of something wonderful at St. Malachy's High School.
The St. Max years were life-changing. They were incredible for Ben. And St. Malachy's staff were incredible, really. They were so creative and really wanted to give Ben exposure to all of the other things that the high school students had exposure to.
Oftentimes I would see Ben come in the morning, and every morning I would think how challenging it was for him to get to that point in his day where the rest of us perhaps might just hop out of bed, hop in the shower. It would be much more complicated for Ben. Never did I see Ben out of sorts, always with a smile, so I had great admiration for that.
When I started working with Ben, we just took it as every student had the ability to learn. We just had to find the best solution for him. He was just included in everything that everybody else did.
Before St. Max, I didn't really understand what inclusion meant. I quickly learned it isn't something that just happens. It's about having the right attitude, accepting people for who they are, and finding ways for them to contribute and belong. St. Max lives and breathes inclusion. Students get the best shot at a bright future, not a life of sitting at home.
When Connor was in school, we didn't go into the school and say to his math teacher, here's how to teach him math. That just happened. But with Ben, we did have to help the teachers with, here are some of the things that you can do differently that will help to stimulate him, that will get him to a learning state, if you will.
Ben was succeeding in school. He could even walk a couple of 100 feet with a walker. As for talking, speech experts continued to give us little hope. But they didn't tell us about this.
I am 24 years old.
Yeah, I know that very well, Ben. Yeah.
Old.
Yeah. I was there when you started.
We call it his talker. He controls it with his eyes, and it was a game changer. Dr. Mir Benanji, a speech disorder specialist from Louisiana State University, believed in Ben so much that she designed his first communication system. After 19 years without a voice, he suddenly had the gift of words.
It's really amazing, and it really validates kind of how sarcastic and witty we always knew he was from the looks he would always give us. To really hear that verbalized is really fun. It's nice that now he's able to find his own voice.
After 6 years at St. Max, Ben was 21 and finishing grade 12. He went to the high school prom, and then came one of the most surreal experiences of our lives, graduation. Against all odds, our son had made it. And on that wondrous night, he stood.
The first diploma we will present tonight is Benjamin Michael George, graduate class 2013.
It was really emotional. It was great. I cried everything, but I definitely cried at that.
Who knows? I didn't see anything from there because I was crying so hard that it was just, it was a blur. And we were all there and clapping so loudly and cheering for him. And so too was the entire graduating class. They were on their feet and all giving him a standing ovation. I just remember it was an incredible moment.
The very sick boy who was never going to walk, talk, or go to school has become a young man with an education and a voice that's helping him define a future that's bigger than his past. 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, he continues to learn. Ben George, high school graduate, is a university student. Ben takes one course per term at the University of New Brunswick in St. John. He's a good student and has done well in most of his courses. Never has a student with his level of challenges studied on this campus, but UNB was willing to help Ben succeed and make him feel he belonged. Once, he used his talker to make a presentation with his friend Gracelyn in a sports psychology class.
It went well. We'd practiced it a lot, and I don't even think he repeated himself once. I think he was very comfortable up there. I don't think he was nervous at all with everybody looking at us while we presented for an hour. So, yeah.
It was spellbinding. It was just superb. And Gracelyn would help do the PowerPoint presentation, and Ben would do the talking, and it was wonderful.
He said it was fantastic overall. Yeah, we got 19 out of 20, so I think he liked it.
Ben got an A+ in that course. We were ecstatic. So how does he do it? His assistants take notes for him and help him study. And so far, his exams have been mostly multiple choice or true or false, and he gets extra time to complete them. It works, because if we know how to teach Ben, he knows how to learn.
For me personally, as a professor, To have a student like Ben in my class is like opening up a ray of sunshine, no question, because everything is different with Ben in your classroom. 35 or 40 years ago, you wouldn't see a Ben George on this campus. Thank goodness the world can change, and we can all change as part of it.
I've always felt that Ben is, and I've always said to people that he's a genius trapped in a body that doesn't work. That just because we can't understand what he's thinking, that just because he can't articulate it, doesn't mean that there's not a whole lot going on in his head.
I don't think it's been an easy road for Ben or my parents. I'm immensely proud of all three of them for everything that they do every single day. Ben couldn't have been born to greater parents for his situation. I mean, they never stop pushing him ever. I honestly don't know how they do it. They work really, really hard.
It's true. Ben is no different from other people his age. He wants to love and be loved, to learn, to spend time with his friends, to feel safe, and to contribute. His achievements have shown us the power of an inclusive community, a community that supports his hopes and dreams.
Ben has shown people that there's no reason why you can't excel at anything.
I think that he'll just find himself in an environment where he's always around people and always learning, because those are the two things that he really likes to do.
The question that is asked, or the statement that's made most frequently, is, I don't know how you do it. And you do it with the support of family, the strength of faith, the desire to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Do I think specifically about how will he get a job and how will he earn money and how will he do the other things that young adults do? I don't think about that. I try to take one day at a time.
Life isn't perfect. I still meet people who don't believe in me. My parents still get overwhelmed and discouraged, and there are barriers to overcome every day. But special people seem to show up at the right time, and that's what helps most. How I approach life is more dramatic because of my disabilities, but so what? My dad says, if you can dream something up, there is always a path to get there. Step by step, we are finding our way.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Mike George for joining us today. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.